the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority in this as all prevail. Assent and you are sane, demur, you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain.
Dickinson became known around Amherst as the Myth and the Shadow Lady. Neighbors would occasionally catch glimpses of her white-clad figure kneeling on a blanket to work in the garden. Old friends, refused an audience with the poet, would receive flowers, a vaguely apologetic note, and sometimes a short poem. My heart upon a little plate, her palate to delight, a berry or a bun would be, might it an apricot.
Emily Dickinson wrote poetry because she discovered that she could communicate with people and still maintain her safety in her own house and behind her words.
When I'm writing, everything is mine.
There's a certain slant of light, winter afternoons, that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes.
I taste a liquor never brewed, from tankards scooped in pearl.
I reckon, when I count at all, first poets, then the sun, then summer, then the heaven of God, and then the list is done.
In 1863, Dickinson wrote what is probably her most famous poem. In it, she imagines death as a courteous, gentleman caller.
Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality.
We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put aside my labor, and my leisure too, for his civility.
We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun.
Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer, my gown, my tippet, only tulle.
We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground.
Since then 'tis centuries, yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity.
Second question. Miss Dickinson, are you in love with death?
Oh, I don't think I would put it that way. I don't think I'm in love with death.
You're right, I am in love with death, because death is in love with me.
I will admit, quite frankly, that I have been seduced by death.
Keats actually says that he was in love, half in love with easeful death. But Emily Dickinson, aren't they asking the wrong poet this question? Aren't they asking?
No, she is, maybe she's not in love with death, but anybody who has read 5 poems of hers realizes that she is obsessed with death.
And you think it's fair to ask an actress who, 100 years later, 130 years later, who has been living in Newton?
I consider death to be an orgasmic moment.
There is a finished feeling, experienced at graves, a leisure of the future, a wilderness of sighs.
Dickinson's experience with death, it was something we can hardly imagine in the late 20th century. Entire families devastated by typhoid or diphtheria, and you can see this in the cemeteries, the headstones one after another, and you see how quickly children were dying. Death was always there, and there in a very, very powerful way.
A dimple in the tomb makes that ferocious room a home.
I think what she did was just to rehearse death over and over in her poems.
Death is like the insect menacing the tree.
Death is a dialogue between the spirit and the dust.
To die takes just a little while,
They say it doesn't hurt.
I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room.
Dickinson really is a voice from the grave. And that's really the place that she occupies, the site.
Safe in their alabaster chambers, untouched by morning and untouched by noon, lie the meek members of the resurrection, rafter of satin and roof of stone. Grand go the years in the crescent above them, worlds scoop their arcs, and firmaments row. Diadems drop, and doges surrender, soundless as dots on a disk of snow.
Dickinson's examinations of death in her poetry did not make the losses in her life any easier.
She went to pieces when friends died. She didn't know what had happened, what happened to their body, what happened to them physically.
When her adored nephew Gilbert succumbed to typhoid fever, it was more than she could bear.
I see him in the star, and meet his sweet velocity in everything that flies. His life was like the bugle, which winds itself away, his elegy an echo, his requiem ecstasy.
All but death can be adjusted, dynasties repaired, systems settled in their sockets, citadels dissolved, wastes of lives resown with colors by succeeding springs. Death unto itself, exception, is exempt from change.
It would be a little radical of me to say that death was her God, but I think it was something like that. I think death was what gave her her spiritual dimension.
I don't really know if death was Dickinson's God, but in her poetry she seems to show a lot more respect for the Grim Reaper than she does for the Lord above.
Of God we ask one favor, that we may be forgiven, for what he is presumed to know, the crime from us is hidden. Immured the whole of life within a magic prison, we reprimand the happiness that too competes with heaven.
Third question. Miss Dickinson, do you have a problem with God?
No, I do not have a problem with God.
Yeah, I have a problem with God.
A problem with God.
God is a bit cold.
Emily Dickinson would not understand a problem with God.
God makes you come to him.
God is indeed a jealous God. He cannot bear to see that we had rather not with him, but with each other play.
The teaching of my childhood has led me to believe that God is a killjoy.
Emily Dickinson was born into the Congregationalist faith, which held that all human souls are condemned by original sin, but that a preordained few have been selected to join God in heaven. It was left to the pious to fill their lives with good works as an offer of proof that they were indeed among the select.
She had teachers who just really impressed her with a harsh view of damnation and what happened to people after they died if they had no faith or if they hadn't been good. That was the big thing, you had to be good.
Religion was so integrated into the society and into politics, into the way the town was run, that it was just automatic that you were a Christian, automatic that you joined the church. But nothing was automatic with Dickinson. She questioned everything. She just couldn't publicly say, yes, I give my life to Christ. She couldn't give her life to anybody.
I am one of the lingering bad ones, and so I do slink away and pause and ponder and pause, and do work without knowing why, not surely for this brief world, and more sure it is not for heaven.
Her poem about I keep the Sabbath by staying at home is a hand grenade. You know, it's a bomb thrown into a church.
Some keep the Sabbath going to church. I keep it staying at home, with a bobolink for a chorister and an orchard for a dome.
Don't go to church. Sit in your backyard on Sunday morning and listen to this bird. I mean, that's a very radical statement.